Greetings, Patriots, and welcome to another episode of The Spirit of 1776, brought to you by the 1776 community. I am your host, Brock Fankhauser, and today we have a special guest joining us, and we're going to discuss one of the 5 core values of our company, and that's giving back. More specifically, when we talk about giving back at the 1776 community, it's giving back to those who served. It's delivering the American dream to wounded veterans, which we're doing in our first neighborhood in Gastonia. And it's sacrificing for those who have already sacrificed for us. And I can think of no better guest to join us on this podcast than Major Allen Jenkins of the United States Army Reserve, a good friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. Allen, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you having me here. Super excited to be here and have a good conversation.
Absolutely. Why don't we start? You can tell us, who is Allen Jenkins?
So was born in Virginia, and then kind of stayed my whole life in the Southeast, and then kind of got a calling to do something like serve in the United States Army, and then spent a bit over a decade on active duty as an infantry officer, and then left active duty in 2017. Decided to stay in the reserves and pursued an opportunity to work in cybersecurity. So living in South Carolina right now, enjoy the freedoms and opportunities that I've been afforded from my career to pursue kind of like a lot more hobbies than you do on active duty, whether it's kind of firearm stuff or archery or hunting and fishing and just being outside. So that's kind
One
of
of the most prolific hunters that I know, and I wish we had time to dive into that maybe a next time, but you own that space across the spectrum of all of my friends and pals. So who or what motivated you at first to enlist?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't come from a family of military servants, in the sense that, like, my father was actually quite against it. His brothers kind of grew up in the era of the Vietnam War, and I think that kind of had a dramatic impact on his kind of willingness to send his son to fight, right? So right after college, I had this grandiose idea that I was gonna become a lawyer, right? I was gonna go to law school, become an attorney, and I worked for a law firm all the way through college. But I kind of came to a moral crossroads in that what happened, seeing the caseloads, and it was a general practice attorney, so you got to see all kinds of stuff. And I decided that law enforcement was a better view, or a better job for me and kind of my morality, I guess. I could sleep better at night. And I spent about a year on the police department, and I kind of wanted to serve at a greater scale, right? So when I was in college, that's when 9/11 happened. But in full transparency, while I was a police officer, my father had retired from Virginia and moved down to where we were living in South Carolina, and bought me a house. So as a newly graduate, my dad bought me a house and was like, hey, just make the payments whenever you can, right? Just do your job, just whatever. So I had this like thing brewing within me that I wanted to go serve. Like I was thinking about the military and all that kind of stuff. And one of my best friends growing up, he was an ROTC guy. So he knew his path or his trajectory all the way through college, and then commissioned actually in the Air Force. So I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I got this, I have this idea, this calling that I'm feeling. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think I should do? And so we talked about it, and then I read this story about Pat Tillman. So Pat Tillman is I think a lot of people know, was a professional football player. And
A beast. A
yes,
beast of a man. Yeah.
he was, and playing for the Arizona Cardinals, and he actually turned down like a new contract because he felt so convicted to go serve his country after 9/11. And I started looking at that, and I was like, wait a minute, if this guy at the pinnacle of his athletic career and his professional career, if his calling was worth more than all the monetary and the easiness of his current life, I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what do I have that's keeping me here and making me so afraid to kind of follow my calling? So that I think Pat Tillman and his story basically had the most to do with me actually making the final decision to join the military. And then, simply enough, why I chose the Army is that I didn't want to be a pilot, or I didn't want to be on an aircraft. I figured if something bad happened, that, at least I'd be on the ground in the Army. And I loved to hunt and fish growing up, so I'd be on the ground. Little did I know that being in the Army has nothing to do with hiking and hunting and fishing. But and then later on, I'd be jumping out of those planes anyway. So I felt like I chose the right path, but how I got there might have been a little bit juvenile.
Wasn't Tillman a Green Beret?
Oh no, he's actually in the 75th Ranger Regiment. So he was a Army Ranger.
Ranger. Did
Yeah.
you start in a special forces?
So when I was a captain, I dropped a packet for what they called SFAS, Special Forces Selection and Assessment, right? Or assessment and selection, and got selected. Went to Fort Bragg to go into the Special Forces qualification course. Made it through language school, barely. It was an Arabic language. And then went out to what they call SUT, or Small Unit Tactics. And I'd been battling a neck injury up until then, and went through the gates, went out to SUT, and on the first jump, it was a combat jump, and had a bad jump. And about, I think it was less than a week later, I was up at Walter Reed getting spinal surgery. So
Yeah.
that put an end to my Special Forces career.
Yeah. But you continue to serve to this day, right? In reserves, you've made your way up to major.
Yep.
What drives you? I understand what drove you initially, and that, to think about how Pat Tillman inspired countless others to do what you did. It's an awesome backstory, but you continue to do it now. What's driving it today?
First of all, I mean, the United States of America is the best country on the face of the earth in the history of the planet, in my opinion. After I began serving, it became much more apparent to me just how great this nation is, right? What I guess inspires me to continue to serve, first and foremost, is the position or the ability that I have to teach, coach, mentor, and influence the next generation of warfighters. From my own patriotism, my own love of country, but also to hopefully in some way provide them with the motivation or the inspiration to make the Army and make this nation a better place.
Yeah, good one. I appreciate that. What is the hardest thing you've had to do thus far as part of your service? Or maybe it's been a few things.
Yeah, it's a few things. I mean, quite the obvious, getting to know the best men and women that this nation has to offer, and then them getting killed, right? That's tough to deal with. And so many veterans go through this on a daily basis, right? There's that. Just the time away from family, just that commitment. And then I think something that is maybe less talked about, but especially as a leader, is doing what you know is right, but is going to be unpopular. Being hard on your subordinates, or the men and women in which you serve. For me, I might slip up, but yes, there are a lot of great women, but when I serve, as an infantry officer, like they were all men, right? It was before that full integration. But so yeah, like having to be hard, train hard, and pushing people to do what they don't want to do. It gets to be very unpopular until they're faced with a situation that they have to fall back on their training, and then it becomes appreciative. So it's that delayed kind of gratification if you ever get it as a leader. But being a leader, most of my leadership experience is within the Army. And so I think the biggest challenge, for that as a leader is not, you don't get that feedback loop often, right? And so it's the whole adage that it's lonely at the top rings true, and that you do whatever you can day in and day out, knowing that it's going to be for the betterment of the people that you serve. And that you might not always get that gratification or that confirmation that what you did made a positive difference.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, though, aren't you preparing in any circumstance? You're preparing for battle. Is that true?
100%. Lethality and survivability are the two kind of like core tenets of training, and that's what we're preparing in the infantry or in the combat arms. That's what we're preparing to do.
So that you don't experience something for the first time in an actual life or death situation.
Yep. You want to make it,
Yeah.
you want to make, training as tough and as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had to do it all over again, right? You go back to when you were a teenager or late teens, you said, this is what my life is going to look like. Would you do anything differently?
I don't think so. In fact, I thought a lot about it. Like there's been a lot of, maybe not a lot of, but a number of, aspects of my career, of my life. And I've looked back and said, like, did I make the right choice here? Because in full transparency, I could have promoted at maybe a greater or a faster rate. But my choice to serve came down to kind of like three, I guess, elements to determine whether or not I was going to stay in, right? One, it was like, is it still fun, right? Am I still having a good time? I'm still enjoying it. And that doesn't mean like across the board. I mean, you're going to have bad days. There's going to be bad situations or whatever like that. And then do I still believe in the mission, right? And then the last one was, do I think I continue to make a positive difference? And so by the last one, continue to make a positive difference, like I was before I made any decisions as a leader, my guys were my first priority. And that doesn't always resonate with or is always popular at the top, right? Like, I mean, just being honest that, there are certain decisions that I have had to make that were for the benefit of what I felt was the right thing to do for my guys that wasn't necessarily well received at the top. So I don't think that I would have done anything differently, especially now. I mean, the best confirmation that I made the right choices and I did the right things was years later, decades later. I've had people that, that I led reach out to me and was like, hey, you know what? Like, thank you. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I did something right. That those decisions, they were worth it, right? So I think everyone has their own journey, and whatever your end state is, or whatever my end state was, I had to experience everything that I did in order to get there, right? Like it would be so easy to say, hey, looking back, if I would have gone to like joined ROTC, or I would have made the decision to serve earlier, that would have had a more positive impact on it. And I don't really believe in that. Like, believe me, as a college kid, military, this type of life was the furthest thing from my mind. I made mistakes. I did dumb shit all the time. But it's those lessons that I learned that I think, I mean, at a very fundamental way, I could relate to these 18, 19-year-olds that were joining the Army when I was a captain, right? That, hey, I've been there, done that. So it helped me be more compassionate, maybe, as a leader. So, no, I think I don't think I would have done anything differently. And if I had the ability to do anything differently, I don't think it would have turned out as good as it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Obviously, you've given back for more than 20 years. You're going to keep giving back. I know few people more patriotic than you, as evidenced in your July 4th celebrations, which are epic, epic. And what can, for those of us who have never served, right, but we have this patriotic yearning and we want to give back, what are things that citizens can do from someone with a lot of experience in the armed forces? What can we do to give back?
I guess to clarify, do you mean give back to the nation, give back to the community, or give back to veterans? Because I kind of look at those as kind of like nuanced.
Um,
Um,
give back to the nation, right? Because it's implied that when you serve your nation, you're giving back to the nation in many, many ways, of course. But for
yeah,
those of us that have normal lives, right? You have a job, you have a family, but do you really focus on giving back to the nation and specific ways of doing that? From someone from a military background, what can citizens do to make a positive impact?
yeah. I think first of all, I never thought that the word patriotism would be so triggering in this day and age. But for all you patriots out there, don't be afraid to express your love of country. I mean, that's first and foremost, right? Be proud to wave the flag. Be proud of your nation. Yeah, this nation has its challenges. Yeah, it's got things that it needs to work on. Our history is not pristine, if you will, but I think if you look at where we've come from and where we are today, we've learned a lot of lessons. We've implemented a lot of good stuff due to those lessons. But to give back, I think one is don't be afraid to relish in the greatness of this nation and express that. The other, I think it starts in the communities, right? And having open, respectful dialogue with our neighbors. Yeah, I mean, it's because it's patriotism and to give back to your nation is more than just wearing a uniform. It's more than just like it's a core value and a core belief in my view. And so there's too many people that I think feel the way that we feel, but through social pressures, professional pressures, or whatever. Like this is why like 1776 as a community is just such a necessary thing for this day and age. But to be honest with you, the fact that it is necessary and the fact that it is novel is almost disappointing, right? Like because every community within the United States should mirror what 1776 is sought out to do and to bring us back to, right? So I think it starts there is just love your country. And for those who want to give back to, veterans or whatever like that, like that aspect is a kind of tough one. Because it was my like utmost honor and privilege to serve and to kind of put into action my patriotism, if you will. So it does not go, I guess, unappreciated, the thank you for your service kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you know how you can, like, in my view, and maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but how you can thank a veteran for their service is to put your love of country into action in whatever you're doing. And I know that's kind of broad and it's not really maybe like a tangible like call to action, but maybe it's, not shying away from a difficult conversation or correcting someone when they and setting the record straight when they disparage the United States,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When they hear someone or see someone burning the flag, right? Like in a protest malicious way. Like not to say that you need to stomp it out or whatever like that and get violent about it, but understanding that like, hey, everyone's got a right. Like I fought for everyone's rights to do everything underneath, the that's guaranteed by the United States Constitution. Doesn't mean I like it though. And it doesn't mean that we can't be outspoken against some of these things, in my view. And coming from a place of gratitude. I mean, and I would also challenge people out there, and I mean, this might be a little bit in an echo chamber, but challenge, like, if you have like kind of negative things to say about the United States, like, go around to some of these like third world countries, right? Go around it, just travel the world and get outside of your resorts, get outside of the tourist areas and see how these people live, right? And the irony of it is that these people that have way less opportunity, have way less means, a lot of times I found out that they're the ones that are outspokenly like in favor of their country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why are we any different, right? Like, why are we not able to delineate between challenges but still love your country? And I think that kind of gets lost.
Because we've had it so well, right? There's a benefit to having things so well that it actually can swing in an unintended direction. And that's what we talk about at 1776 is the wave of patriotism. It's never a static sentiment. There's peaks, there's valleys. We're honest with ourselves that we're in a valley right now, and we've seen what it's like to be at a peak. It just requires work. It's not going to get to a peak by doing nothing.
Yeah, and it's also that whole adage that, what is it? Weak men create tough times, and tough times create strong men. Strong men create good times, then good times create weak men.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of that, but I mean, I'm not here to provide any tangible answers of how, when those good times are good, how to keep them good and not become weak. Because that's a deliberate effort in and of itself, right? Is to not lose sight of how we got here when we are in the good times.
And our founders made it clear from the beginning this was to be it was founded as a more perfect nation. We're a more perfect nation today. In essence, they were planting the seed that we are far from perfect. Yep. We always will be fallible and imperfect. And I just think that was an amazing down payment that they made as a reminder that you'll never get there. You'll never get to that utopia, even if you work hard, even if you serve like you have. And that's what keeps me going, is that striving for something better.
Yeah. And it starts, I know, as cliche as it might sound, it starts in your communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
It starts with your neighbors. It starts there. That's hopefully that wave that starts at such a small kind of population, permeates throughout the United States.
It's what we're doing at 1776. We make it clear this is a zip code movement.
Yep.
You can impact your zip code. If you want to make a difference, start there. You have a lot of commonalities with people at the zip code level, much more than you would with some of the resources that we sometimes find ourselves dedicating mental resources to electoral politics for these folks along the Potomac River, right? A few hundred miles from where we are right now. We have no impact on that. That is not a zip code movement. But 1776 is a zip code movement, and we want to be in a lot of them. And that's where I think people are going to get the satisfaction that even just the little contributions that you make to giving back will make a big difference in that 5-number zip code.
Yeah, for sure. And then maybe as more zip codes get changed, DC takes on a different shape as well.
Maybe more perfect, at least, right?
For sure. For sure.
Speaking of more perfect, sir, thank you for everything that you've done for our nation. Thank you for our friendship. You're a great, great patriot. You're one of the first guests that we've ever had on this podcast for a reason. It's been our treat to learn a little bit more about you and to share your experience with our audience. And we thank you, Allen.
Appreciate it, Brock. Really love what you guys are doing over in 1776. Glad to be a part of it and glad to be a part of this podcast. So really appreciate it and keep it up, man. You're doing good things.
Yeah, buddy. Stay free.